Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Geometry Overview. We are going to look at some concepts in geometry of some of the major things that you would have learned in that geometry class. So we're going to take your notebook and open to the last 4 or 5 pages, and that's where we're going to put all our overview notes for the week. So if you could do that, we will start talking about geometry and what you should have remembered from geometry class. So one of the main topics in geometry was right triangle relationships. And if we talk about right triangle relationships, that was one of the key things with the right triangle relationships is that we have a right angle. And sometimes that right angle is noted by doing a little square in the corner of the triangle instead of putting the 90-degree symbol there. So what you need to know about right triangles is obviously it has a right angle, and then the other two angles are going to be acute, and the sides that are off of the 90-degree angles are called your legs, and the hypotenuse is always across from the 90-degree angle, and that's always going to be your longest side. Okay, and so we can use right triangles for many things, and one of the things that you were able to do that with right triangles is that if you were given two sides, you could find the third side. And how did we do that? Well, we used what was called the Pythagorean theorem. The Pythagorean theorem is the a squared plus the b squared equals the c squared, where the a squared and the b squared are your legs squared, and that equals your hypotenuse squared. And what you can do is you can solve for any of these values. If you have two sides, you can find the third side, any of the third sides, by solving for your x, your a, your b, your c, whatever letter you're using to represent the Pythagorean theorem. But what if you were only given one side and not two sides, but you were also given an angle? Say this angle was 27 degrees. So if you're just given one side and an angle, we would use the relationships that we talked about in geometry called the trigonometric ratios. That's SOHCAHTOA. So you probably heard that mnemonic, SOHCAHTOA. And so the trig ratios are, say we have sine theta, that's like the sine of the angle, okay? So theta is just another way of saying angle, okay? And that sine of that angle is equal to the opposite over the hypotenuse sides, that ratio, okay? So you need an acute angle, okay? And you need to know where you're standing. So I always tell students that if you have an angle and that's the side you're looking at, always put yourself there, okay? Always put yourself there, backwards hat, that makes you look cooler or whatever. Or you can just put a smiley face. It doesn't really matter, but make sure that you have an acute angle and that is where you're standing so that you can use these trig ratios. Sine, opposite over hypotenuse. Cosine of theta is adjacent over hypotenuse, the ratio of those sides. And then tangent is the ratio of the opposite side over the adjacent. But if you don't know where you're standing, how do you know if you're talking about the adjacent angle or adjacent side or the opposite side? So you have to put yourself, in place so that you can say, oh, this is the adjacent side, that would be the opposite side. When you look across, that would be opposite. You always have to make sure you have that acute angle and that you're standing there. All right, so that's right triangle relationships. A couple other things that you learned in geometry were area and perimeter formulas. Let's start with perimeter. Perimeter is the distance around the outside of the figure. So basically what you do is you add up all the sides. So you add up all the sides of the 4-sided figure, the 5-sided figure, the 6-sided figure, however many sides, pentagon, octagon, it doesn't matter. It could be 14 sides, and I don't know what the name of that is, and maybe you don't either, and that's not important, but the perimeter is that you take all the sides and you add them up. Now, Circumference of the circle is another way of saying perimeter, but it's around the circle. So we're going to go all the way around the circle and find that distance around the circle. That's 2 pi r. 2 times pi, you can use 3.14, or you can leave it in terms of pi, and then times r, which is the radius. Okay, so circumference of a circle is a lot like what we say perimeter is of the other figures. Area is also a huge huge idea in geometry, and all these formulas would be good formulas for you to know. Area is the square units inside the figure, so I'm not talking about the outside now, I'm talking about what would be on the inside. How much area, how much is on the inside of the figure. So area of a triangle is 1/2 base times height. Just make sure that you're using your height and your base. Okay, this could be the height or this could be the base when you have a triangle like this, and then it's 1/2 base times height. Rectangle is area is equal to base times height. You also probably heard it as length times width. Okay, you also might have learned triangle as base times height divided by 2. Okay, that might have been something that your teacher said. That doesn't really matter as long as you remember them one way or the other. A parallelogram, just be careful with the parallelogram. You got 2 sets of sides that are parallel. Okay, and if this is the base, that height has to come from a 90-degree angle. So just make sure that your height is always coming from a 90-degree angle. Okay. The area of a trapezoid, trapezoid looks kind of like this. Okay. Now your bases are going to be the sides that are parallel. Okay. Not the sides that come in. Okay. So it's base 1 plus base 2. The average of those bases is what some teachers say times the height, or you can say half the height times base 1 plus base 2, same thing. Okay, and then the area of the circle is, like I said, the inside of that circle. It looks a lot like it, but now it's pi r squared. So you have to take the radius and square it for the area of the circle. So these are some of the formulas that would be really good for you to know. All right, and then some other facts that maybe you should know about, just kind of an overview again. A triangle has interior angles that add up to be 180. A quadrilateral is a 4-sided shape, and all of its angles add up to 360. And so then a 5-sided figure, just add 180 to that. So every time you add a new side, you would add 180 degrees to the interior angles. Parallelograms with 2 pairs of parallel sides. Remember what that looks like again. 2 pairs of parallel sides. Sometimes they note they note these parallels with these little arrows, and double arrow, so you know which ones are parallel. Have opposite angles that are congruent. So opposite angles are congruent. Okay, so these 2 are congruent, these 2 are congruent. And then they have consecutive angles that are supplementary. So the 2 that are in a row add up to be 180 degrees. Supplementary is 180. And consecutive means right next to each other. Don't confuse supplementary with complementary. This is how I remember and how I teach my students usually, is that C is 90. And if I put 2 C's together and kind of backwards, look what it makes. It makes 2 90s, which make 180. Okay, so 2 C's, each C is 90. A whole S is 180. Congruent figures, equal measurement, or that means you can either have equal measurements of sides or angles, and we use this symbol. It's an equal sign with a little curvature on top. Similar, same shape but different sizes. You have scale factors. You have to make sure all the scale factors work for all the sides. You use the ratios to make sure that they're all similar. Similar is just the top part of the congruent. And then the formula for midpoint is just the average of the points, average of the 2 points. So you might have seen this formula, x1 plus x2 divided by 2, y1 plus y2 divided by 2. So if I give you 2 points, what's the midpoint? 1, 3. 5, 5. Add the x's together. That'd be 6 divided by 2. So that'd be 3. 3 plus 5 is 8. 8 divided by 2 is 4. The midpoint would be 3, 4. All right. So these are some basic overview things that you need to know to either to carry over from one class to another, or if you are being tested on them. Thank you for taking good notes, and we'll practice some of these problems soon. Peace out.